Hey, before I dive into this story, if you find it worth your time, hit that like button, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and please subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate your support to keep sharing stories like this. I can still picture that night like it was yesterday. The sound of my dad's heavy footsteps coming down the stairs, each one echoing like a countdown to something awful. The sharp smell of whiskey hit the room before he even opened his mouth. And my mum, she'd shrink into herself, her shoulders hunching like a tree bending in a storm. It wasn't the first time I'd seen it, and it sure wouldn't be the last. But that night was different. I wasn't the scared 9-year-old hiding under the bed anymore, clutching a torn teddy bear to drown out the yelling.
I'm the guy who put his own father behind bars. And I don't regret it. Sounds harsh, right? But if you've ever lived in a house where every creak could mean trouble, you'd get why I'm saying this. Growing up, I used to wonder if every family was like mine, a place where love always came with bruises. The first time I called the cops, I was 9. I remember my hand shaking as I dialed 911, my voice barely a whisper. When they showed up, though, my mom just said, "I tripped on the stairs." And I believed her. I bought into the idea that family means keeping secrets, that scars are something you hide behind closed doors. That all changed the day I saw a bruise on my daughter's neck. She was only 5, with those big, innocent eyes that hadn't learned fear yet. But that day, when my dad, her grandpa, came over, I caught her flinching, shrinking back the same way my mum always did. I asked her, "Who did this to you?" She wouldn't say, just mumbled, "I don't want Grandpa mad at me." My heart stopped. I racked my brain, trying to figure out what I'd missed. Then it hit me. The week before, when I got home from work, I'd heard my dad snap at her through the door. "Shut up! No crying!" His voice was ice cold, the same tone he'd used on me as a kid. I decided to do something I'd never dared before. I recorded it. I set my phone in the corner, pretending to grab a glass of water, and caught it all. In the clip, he didn't just yell. He raised his hand, not hitting her, but enough to make her scream and run. Watching it back, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just an old man losing his temper. It was the same violence I'd grown up with, passed down like some cursed family heirloom. That night, I sat alone in my room, gripping my phone, my thumb hovering over 911. I told myself, I can't let my daughter grow up like I did. But when I confronted my dad, he stared me down and said something that froze me. "You're just like me." His voice didn't waver, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I stood there, facing the man who raised me, wondering, is he right? Am I turning into the person I hate most? If you've ever thought family business stays in the family, stick with me. Because that night, I dialed 911. And for the first time, I felt like I was actually being a man.
When I signed that complaint, the cop looked at me over his scratched-up glasses and asked, "You sure about this?" I nodded, even though my hand was shaking. I'd never been more certain until they pulled my dad's file. I thought I knew everything about him, the drunken rages, the fists, the empty apologies after my mum patched herself up. But it turns out I'd only seen the tip of the iceberg. They handed me a stack of dusty papers. The cop said, "This isn't his first rodeo." I flipped through, and every line felt like a punch to the gut. In 1998, a preschool teacher reported him for roughing up a kid in her class, a little boy he'd pinched, until his ear bled for running around. Case closed, not enough evidence. In 2007, neighbors called 911 after hearing my mum scream for help in the middle of the night. Cops showed up, but she brushed it off. Just a misunderstanding. I read it with tears burning my eyes. My whole life she'd been covering for him, and so had I. Then came the real gut punch. The police wanted my daughter to testify. She sat there, clutching her doll, sobbing, "Daddy, will Grandpa be mad at me?" I almost walked away right then. I didn't want her carrying this memory forever. But then the cop showed me my dad's interrogation tape. He sat there, hands clasped, voice flat. I was just teaching them a lesson. They asked, "Did you hit your wife and son?" He said, "Men need to be tough. I didn't do anything wrong." I wanted to scream. That wasn't teaching. That was breaking people. I went home and tore the house apart, looking for anything to explain why he was like this. Under the bottom of my mom's closet, I found her old diary. The pages were yellowed, her handwriting shaky. Today he broke the boy's tooth. I said he fell down the stairs. God forgive me. I sank to the floor, clutching that book, crying like a kid. She wasn't just a victim, she'd enabled him, not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know how to stop. Then I dug deeper. In the police files, a distant relative mentioned my dad had been locked in a grain shed for 3 days by his own father, my grandpa, for crying as a kid. Grandpa, a man I barely remember from faded photos, had turned my dad into his shadow. I started wondering, is this all just a cycle? Am I next in line? The day of the trial, my dad looked at me from the defendant's bench. No apologies, no begging, just one last line before they took him away. "You think you're different? Your life will end up the same." I watched the prison door slam shut behind him, telling myself, "No, I won't let it." But deep down, I was terrified he might be right. 2 years after my dad went to prison, a letter showed up. It landed on my table with a soft thud, his shaky handwriting scrawled across the envelope. To my son. I almost burned it on the spot. I didn't want more excuses, but then I saw the tear stains smudging the corner. I opened it, and his voice came alive in my head. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know, the day you stood up in court, it was the first time I saw you as a real man. I decided to see him. I stood outside the prison gate, twisting my mum's wedding ring on my finger. She'd passed from heart failure last year. I walked in planning to yell, to unload decades of pain. But when I saw him in that grey jumpsuit, hands trembling as he clasped them, all I could say was, "Why'd you do it?" He looked at me, eyes red, and said, "Because I never learned how to love until I lost everything." For the first time, I saw him cry. In his letter, he wrote about his childhood. He said when my grandma died, my grandpa beat him unconscious for crying. "I grew up thinking love was weakness," he wrote, "and I was wrong to pass that on to you." Reading it, I realized he wasn't evil. He was a victim of his own past, but he'd chosen to turn that pain into a weapon instead of healing it. A week later, I brought a box of stuff to see him again, the leather strap he'd used, my mum's diary, and a fake family photo we took when I was 10. We burned it all. The flames roared, eating up the pages, but they couldn't erase the scars inside me. As the fire died, I looked at him and said, "I'm not forgiving you for what you did, but I'm done carrying it." He nodded, tears in his eyes. Now, every time my daughter kisses my cheek before bed, I think of what he wrote. "Your little girl's luckier than I was, 'cause she's got a dad who dared to change. I'm not perfect, Once I snapped at her for spilling milk, and I saw that flicker of fear in her eyes, the same one I used to have. But I dropped to my knees, said sorry, and hugged her tight. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's a long road to letting go of the weight. Thanks for sticking with my story this far. If it hit home for you, please subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. I'd love to hear from you. What cycle have you broken in your own life?